write present on the chat box. Okay, so we start off from where we left. So just to recap, am I audible by the way?
Yes.
Hello. So we said we started the quantization of classically conformal field theories, and we had said that the key observables will be basic in any quantum theory, functions on phase space. So functions will become operators. If there are functions of x in space, these are local operators in x, and so these operators we will label as O hat at some xi time ti. The next thing we said was the main observables. So observables, by observables I mean what we are interested in is calculating correlation functions of observables of operators. So these are we call them local operators because these are localized at some point xi and ti. So local operators, and so in the canonical picture, canonical quantization picture, there'll be some state. Typically, we'll use the vacuum state, and then you have to calculate some oxi ti, o1 x1 t1 dot on xn tn, and these in the so this is the canonical picture, canonical quantization, and in the path integral, effectively what we are calculating are d phi. Phi is a basic field of your theory. So one thing is we are calculating it. So actually I don't. So firstly, quantization of this theory is we'll be mainly working in the Euclidean field theory, working in Euclidean setup, and we are assuming that all the answers that we want in the Lorentzian theory are obtained by analytically continuing the time to complex time. Okay, so T2. So we will get all the results in the complex time. So all of this. So actually, yeah. So from here, so all these observables that we calculate will be in the Euclidean formalism. So just write it down like this. So that T goes to T goes to minus I tau, and this means that the action in the Lorentzian picture, which is basically given by L dt, so it should go to plus I tau. So this will go to the Euclidean picture. It will be given by L d tau times I. Okay, and all the fields in the Euclidean picture, in the Lorentzian picture. So any field phi, local field, it will be x comma t, will go to phi Euclidean x comma tau, which is just given by phi of x comma I tau. This is the definition of the Lorentzian, of the Euclidean fields, and what we are calculating. So main observables are correlation functions of local operators. So in the Lorentzian all computations are done in the Euclidean theory. which we calculate in Euclidean theory, and the answer in the Lorentzian case is defined to be the analytic continuation to Minkowski time. So by that I mean you take t goes to I tau, do all the calculations here, and then you go back, you put t equal to minus I tau, minus it. Okay, so take t equal to do everything in the I tau picture, do all the calculations, find the correlation functions, and then analytically continue tau to minus it.
Sir, it is a continuation to Minkowski time.
Continuation to Minkowski time, yeah. Continuation to Minkowski time, meaning you do all the calculations in the Euclidean theory, and then you continue to Minkowski time, meaning you make tau equal to minus it. That's what you have to do. And we said that in the Euclidean picture, the correlation functions. So now since it's Euclidean, I'll write just x. I won't write t because I'll take x and tau to be together to be t x. So what you're calculating are things like this, and what we are interested in are calculating these things in the vacuum. So you have to specify the state, but here we mean the vacuum, and this is given by, in the path integral picture, d phi e to the minus s phi by h cross times O of some phi, O1 of phi x1 dot 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 On of phi xn divided by z. Z is the path integral. And what we said was that first we will look at the effect of symmetries. So just like in the classical case, we'll first look at symmetries and its consequences. So what by that I mean that how much are the correlation functions restricted by demanding that the theory is invariant under so and so symmetries. So in quantum theory, you have to first understand what symmetry means. In classical physics, symmetry transformations are those which keep the action invariant if you are in the Lagrangian formulation. Invariant. But in the quantum theory, symmetry implies Z is invariant. So Z is the important quantity, not S. And by Z I mean d phi times e to the minus s phi by h cross. So if this has to be invariant, both the measure has to be invariant and the action has to be. So this has to be invariant, and this has to be invariant. And the examples where the measure is not invariant, and then we say that the quantum theory, the symmetry is anomalous. Meaning an anomalous symmetry is one where you have a symmetry in the classical theory, but it doesn't exist in the quantum theory.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
স্যার যদি আমরা ক্যানোনিক্যাল কোয়ান্টাইজেশন করি তখন তো জেড থাকছে না, তখন কি ধরনের, তখন সিমেট্রিটা কিসের থাকবে?
তখনও জেড আছে, মানে ক্যানোনিক্যাল তখনও জেড আছে, এটা তো জাস্ট একটা মেথড অফ কম্পিউটিং। তো তখন তুমি বলবে যে যেটা তোমার কি বলবো আইডেন্টিটি, এটাকে ইনভেরিয়েন্ট রাখে, আইডেন্টিটি কোরিলেশন ফাংশনটাকে। ব্যাপারটা একই রকম, যে বেসিক্যালি কোরিলেশন ফাংশনস এর ইনভেরিয়েন্স এর কথা বলছি, ইনভেরিয়েন্স বা ট্রান্সফরমেশনের কথা বলছি।
স্যার ওক্ষেত্রে বলতে পারি কি ওই যে গ্রাউন্ড স্টেটে ইনভেরিয়েন্ট থাকবে।
গ্রাউন্ড স্টেটটা তো ইনভেরিয়েন্ট আমরা অ্যাজিউম করব যে আছে, কিন্তু গ্রাউন্ড স্টেট ইনভেরিয়েন্ট না হলেও ওটাকে উই ডোন্ট কল ইট অ্যানোমালাস। সেখানে আমরা বলবো যে তোমার ওই কনজারভেশন ইকুয়েশনে আমরা এক্সপ্লিসিট দেখতে পারবো যে একটা অ্যানোমালাস টার্ম আছে, তো এই যে ডেল মিউ জে মিউটা জিরো হবে না। সো হ্যাঁ, তো যদি তুমি জিজ্ঞেস করো দেন ইউ উইল সি দ্যাট ডেল মিউ জে মিউ উইল নট বি জিরো as an operator equation. There'll be some extra term there. In fact, we will come across one such anomaly later on.
e to the power minus I s5 হবে না e to the
না
power minus
এটা ইউক্লিডিয়ান, দিস ইজ ইউক্লিডিয়ান। তো এসটা মানে আমরা সবকিছু ইউক্লিডিয়ান করছি, তো e to the I s5 ছিল লরেনজিয়ানে, কিন্তু s5 টা তো I এটা তো e to the I times I s ইউক্লিডিয়ান হয়ে গেল, তো তাই জন্য মাইনাস হয়ে গেল। লরেনজিয়ানে হলে এটা e to the I s5 হতো, but because the Lorentzian theory is not what we discussed last time, that if you have an integral like e to the I x square, this integral is not a well-defined quantity, because this quantity, because usually if it's a minus into plus infinity, it should you say it's convergent if it goes to 0 at infinity, but this integrand does not go to 0 because it's a sine and cos, so it is not well-defined. It depends on how you define it. So one way you can define it, suppose it's e to the I lambda, let's say. One way you define it, you calculate for minus lambda square, calculate all the answer here, and then you analytically continue lambda to I lambda. So that is what we are doing. Instead of x square, you have an action, and instead of lambda, you have t, time, and so you just make t I tau. So that is the idea. Yeah. So the idea is that the Lorentzian theory is now defined through a Euclidean analytic continuation from the Euclidean answer. Okay, that's why there is no I here. It's a minus. So that's why it is well defined also. This quantity is well defined.
okay sir.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so then so when we look at the symmetries, so we first looked at again we try to look at the translation symmetry. So okay, before that, so how was symmetry acting? So the general rule was that you start with this correlation function. So we are asking how the symmetries act on correlation functions. So you act with the correlation functions O1 x1 dot 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 On hat xn, and this is given by 1 by z times d phi e to the minus s phi by h cross O1 x1 dot 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 On xn. Okay. So now you remember that here in this way of writing, these O's are operators, but in this way of writing, O's are just functions of the classical fields, because in the path integral formulation, everything is just classical. You're just integrating on all possible fields. So these are classical functions. Okay. And what you do is that first, suppose you do a arbitrary transformation. So let's say so suppose you calculate. So let's say you're calculating. I'll use the prime. So I'm writing all of this is primed. Okay. So in the first step, this is a definition. Now, since this phi, now this O1 is also a function of this. O1 is actually a function of phi x1 prime and so on. Now, since this phi is integrated over, because the path integral means you're integrating over all functional forms of phi. It's a integration over all possible functions. So phi is really a dummy variable or dummy function actually. So you can and because this integration is all possible, so you can actually just change it to a new phi. You just do a transformation phi to phi prime, and the action will not change. So it will be e to the minus s phi. Sorry, not the action. The partition function will not change. The integral will not change because it's it's just integrating all possible phi. So the integral will not change. Phi prime So and now if I change this to 5 prime, let's call this O1 prime. So O1 prime means just O1 of 5 prime times On prime Xn prime. And Z does not change, so I write so Z does not have O. So since just a dummy variable change, it does not matter. So just write as Z. Z prime is equal to Z. So this is the step 1, and this is just a change of variable. A change of, I should not call it variable because now it's a function. So change of function. Okay. So it's a dummy function, change of dummy function. Just like your dummy variable, you have a dummy function here because it's a functional integral. Change of dummy function. So you have this. This is equal to that. But now let's say that this transformation that you did 5 to 5 prime is a symmetry transformation. Symmetry transformation, whatever it be, translation or whatever it be, the symmetry transformation. Then because it's symmetry transformation, this d5 prime is itself invariant and s5 prime is itself invariant. See the first line, because it's a dummy variable, the d5 prime may not be invariant, but the whole integral is invariant. Okay. But here, because it's a symmetry transformation, not only is the whole integral invariant, even the measure is invariant and the action is invariant, because we have assumed that there is no anomaly. So then therefore there is just d phi e to the minus s phi by h cross. And here you have O1. So now this is also becoming this thing. So it just becomes O1 prime. Sorry, O1 x1 prime. Sorry, what am I saying? No. Right. So this will now become, now the transformation. What is the transformation? The transformation, let's say, so now let's go step by one by one. So let's say it's a translation. So under translation, we have seen that phi prime x prime is phi x. Okay. So if phi prime is phi x, this object becomes O1 x1 dot 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 On x. Yes. So we are now going for translation. So let's do it for translation. For translation, I'll do it for others also. It is exactly the same. So it is this. So what do we get from here? Therefore, basically it means that the correlation function does not change. So you have sorry. And now these are functions, actually functions of n variables. So therefore we can call it f. So let's call this f. So f, so and this statement says it's the same functional dependent. So f x1 prime dot 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 xn prime is equal to f of x1 to xn. When xi prime is xi plus a. Okay. So remember, this is Euclidean theory. So when I shifting, I'm shifting in space and the Euclidean time both. So I can shift in. I can shift in any of them. Okay. So this is a space-time translation, but time is just a space because it's Euclidean. And this immediately, as we said, just means that f is a function of the differences x2 minus x1, x3 minus x1 dot 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 xn minus x. Because when you're shifting by a constant, the function is not changing, so it has to be a function of the difference. So it is this. Okay, now let's look at what happens if it. So now the next impose the Lorentz transformation, which in this case means rotation, Lorentz transformation or rotation. Okay. So then the first step is exactly the same, that you can do the dummy function change. So here I'm doing x prime is lambda x prime I, or x prime mu is lambda mu nu x nu. Then as earlier we have x prime dot 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 x o n x n prime, and this is again given by d phi prime, because I can do a dummy variable change, times s phi prime times o 1 prime of x1 prime dot dot o n prime of x1. So the dummy variable change, and now we use the fact that x prime equal to lambda x. So this is a symmetry transformation. So that would mean that that your phi prime, depending on what kind of field this phi is, so it's a symmetry transformation. So phi prime is related to phi. Depending if it's a vector, it's related by the vector equation. If it's a scalar, it is related by a scalar equation, so on. So what is important is that first this is a symmetry transformation. So that means again this is invariant and this is invariant, and this one will transform depending upon what kind of representation it is. So this will be 1 by z. So now I'll give it a label actually, a1 to an. So this a1 to an is a spin index, a1 to an. So these operators, depending on what kind of operators they are. So this thing will become d phi, this thing will become e to the minus s phi, and this one will be some f a1. So let's call it prime actually, a1 prime to an prime, a1 prime to an prime. So this will be f a1 prime a1 times o1 x1 dot f an prime to an times a1 times on an xn. This one. Okay. So this is the general form of the, if it's a Lorentz transformation, or actually this is the general form for any transformation. So if it's not Lorentz, if it's any other transformation, the same form, the form of f will change. All right. But yeah. So you can write this in the following way, that o a1 prime x1 prime dot o an prime xn prime under any symmetry transformation will be the same as f a1 prime a1 of o a1 x1 dot f an prime an of o an xn. Okay. Now you can do it for any fields, but we will do it for the simplest case, which is the scalars. So we'll assume that these O's are scalars, and we'll work out explicitly, because for other ones also you can do it, but it's much more harder to find what is this thing, but it can be done. So we will do it for scalars, but the method is the same. So let's assume from now on that all these O's are scalars. Okay, and then let's see what happens. So then you have a O x1 prime, O1 x1 prime dot on xn prime. And because it's a scalar, they're all there's no f is 1, so you just have o1 x1 dot on xn, just like earlier. And this is what we had called f x1 prime dot xn. But now this says that this is invariant under Lorentz transformation. Let's impose Lorentz transformation first, right? So if you impose Lorentz transformation, then we know that what is invariant are distances, right? It is because Lorentz transformation or rotation, what is invariant is the distance. So therefore now this function is only a function of the distance, r12, r13, r23 dot r n minus 1 n. You understand what I'm saying? Because so where r12 is just mod of x2 minus x1. So earlier from translation we saw that it was a function of the vector, x2 minus x1, x3 minus x2, and so on and so forth. But now it can be a function of the distance between any two. So it will be a function of x2 minus x1 mod, x3 minus x2 mod, and so on. Okay. So it's now a function of only distances if you impose Lorentz transformation and translation. Okay. So now let's impose. So as I said, we are restricting to scalar functions. Okay, at this point we are restricting to scalar functions. Restrict to scalar functions for as an explicit example. Scalar function as an example, because you can do this for vector functions also, but it is much more complicated. but we will do it explicitly for all functions in 2 dimension where it is easier, but in higher dimension we'll just restrict to scalar functions. Okay, so okay, so in higher dimensions we see that this function is this. Next, let's impose scaling. Now what happens? What was the equation? What was the form? The difference was O. So now actually we have to, we don't have a but we have to give an index, because these are, we are talking about conformal field theory, so it will have the, we have to also specify the delta, right? So let's say delta 1 x1, a delta 2 x2, this is prime, dot dot dot, delta n xn prime, and there here you had f. But what is f in the case of so here we are looking at xi prime is lambda xi. So we know in that case that phi prime x prime is lambda to the minus delta phi x. So this is your f. In the case we have done this a couple of days back, a couple of classes back. So that means that in this case this is equal to lambda to the power for because lambda to the power minus delta 1 O delta 1 of x1 times lambda to the power minus delta 2 O delta 2 of x2 times lambda to the power minus delta n O delta n of x. Right. So what we are doing is just that we just take this this f here for a scaling case, and for the scaling case it is just lambda to the power. It's a determinant del x prime del x to the power mod to the power minus delta by d, which turns out to be minus delta for scalars. Okay. So this is what it is, and this means that f as a function of now it was r1 2 prime r1 3 prime dot 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 rn minus 1 n prime is equal to lambda to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta n times f r12 to r1 n to rn minus 1 n. Right, because this lambda is just a number, it will come out. So under scaling, so when rij prime is equal to lambda rij, right, because you're scaling x, that means that r is also scaled by the same factor.
And this Rij is the distance between 2 points you are talking about.
Yeah, this between x2 minus x1, x3 minus x1, x4, and so on.
Okay.
So when you scale x, the distance will also scale by lambda. So that means that this is a function where if all the arguments are scaled by lambda, the function becomes lambda to some power. That immediately means that function is a homogeneous function, right? So it's a lambda to some power. So it has to be some. I mean, this is called homogeneous scaling. This is called homogeneous scaling, right? So if you scale the argument, the function scales. Not a homogeneous function; it's a homogeneous scaling. Right. And now you have special conformal transformations. Yeah, is it okay if there's a question? Then you can just let me know. So again, in the case of special conformal transformation, because we're looking at scalars, what happens is that I think I'd given this for a homework that under special conformal transformations, r12 prime will transform like r12 over square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square times square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square. This is how it transforms distance between 2 points under special conformal transformations. And the determinant del x prime del x mod to the power minus delta by d is given by 1 minus 2b dot x plus b square x square to the power of delta. This is what it is given by. So yeah, so this is how it goes, and a scalar function transforms under this phi prime x prime is del x prime del x mod to the power minus delta by d phi x. This is how a scalar function transforms, where this del x prime del x is this object. So if you just substitute it there, Okay. So what that means is yeah. So if I take this function and I take r12 prime, r13 prime dot dot dot, rn minus 1 prime n, they should go by this factor. This factor. So it should be 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power minus delta 1, sorry, plus delta 1 dot 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 1 minus 2 b dot xn plus b square xn square to the power of plus delta n times f r12 dot 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 rn minus 1 n. Why? Because it's same like this lambda, except that this instead of constant lambda you have this function, so it just comes out, and so you have delta 1, delta 2, delta 3 up to delta n. Okay. So this is how these functions transform. Now let's see how we can use this to constrain the correlation functions. Is this okay? This part I didn't give the details, but the same thing like here, because in this case also it transforms exactly like this, except that instead of lambda you have this factor 1 minus 2b dot sorry, this yeah, we have this, yeah, we have this factor, and yeah.
These factors comes out because the integration is over these all possible fields.
1 second. Sorry. No, these factors comes out, no, because the x is not a field. No, it's an argument.
Yeah.
It's just x1. Yeah. These are fixed numbers. So
Yeah.
x1 to xn are fixed numbers. So they're not fields. So they're not integrated over.
Okay.
So they just
Yeah.
come out. Yeah. And this r12 prime is given by this r12 by r minus 2b dot. Okay, so these are the constraints from translation, Lorentz transformation or Euclidean rotation, scaling, and special conformal transformation. So now let's see what kind of constraints we can get. So now let's look at first. We can look at a 1-point function. 1-point function means you just take a single one, O1 x1, and let's see what happens to this. So in this case, it's just a function of one variable. So you have f of x1, and we know from scaling, from translation, that f of x1. So firstly, so yeah, so f of x1 plus a1 has to be equal to f of x1. A1 meaning a, f of x1 plus a, the constant scaling has to be f of x1. And if it's f of x1, the only this means that f is a constant. It is independent of x, right? Because you shift the argument, it is not shifting at all. So the only possibility is that.
Sir, it is a or a1 x1.
A, when it says the translation, when you do translation, then all the we shift all of them by here. Of course, it doesn't matter because there's only one x1. Okay. So this is translation. We're imposing translation invariance. Okay. Then what we do is that let's see what happens from scaling. So we are not using Lorentz invariance because this is a constant. So it will just tell you that f is equal to f. So that will not impose any stress. So no constraint from Lorentz invariance. No extra constraint from Lorentz invariance. Right? Because f is a constant. So if you do a Lorentz transformation, it will not change. And that is all it will tell you. But if you do scaling, then something happens. Because we know that under scaling, f of lambda x, we have just seen, should be lambda to the power minus delta f of x. But we know f is a constant. So then that means that a constant function has to become lambda to the minus delta f, has to be equal to lambda to the minus delta of itself. And that is only possible if f is 0. Okay. So all 1-point functions in these theories will vanish. There are no 1-point functions, automatically 0. for primary fields, meaning those that have these which transform under. Okay. Now let's look at 2-point function.
Sir, can you repeat the last point? Why f becomes 0? I couldn't
Yeah,
get
f
it.
becomes 0 because f is because when you scale, we know how f transforms under scaling. So this is how it transforms, right? This is how it transforms. Now
Yes.
instead of you have only one. Now here f is a constant. So constant is equal to lambda to the minus delta times constant for any lambda, right? If you have a constant equal to lambda times the same constant, okay, meaning f, suppose you have your equation which says x equal to 5x. Okay, the only
Okay.
solution to that is x equal to 0.
X will be there. Okay, okay.
Now let's look at 2-point functions. So look at 2-point functions. Immediately we see from translation that it has to be a function, and translation in Lorentz transformation, we know it has to be a function of R12, right? So we are looking at the 2-point function O1 x1 and O2 x2, let's say. And this has dimension delta 1. If we look at scalar functions, scalar operators, so delta 1, delta 2, no spin. Okay, so from translation and Lorentz transformation, we know the function has to be a function of R12. Okay. Now let's do scaling. So scaling will tell you that f of x R12, sorry, f of lambda R12 is equal to lambda. So how much it should be? Minus delta 1 minus delta 2 times f of R1. Right? Now this is very easy. It's a function of a single variable. Then the only solution to this is that this function must be homogeneous function, meaning it has to be just so this implies immediately for all lambda. So this implies immediately that f of R12 has to be some constant times R12 to the power of minus delta 1 minus delta 2. Nothing else is possible. This constant will of course depend on delta 1, delta 2, because for different things it can be different. But other than that, it doesn't depend on, it's a constant. Is this clear why this is the same? Because if you have a function of a single variable and it has scaling property, that if there's a function f of x, which is this property f of lambda x is lambda to the power delta f of x, then the only possibility is x to the power of delta up to a constant. You understand? If it was a function of two variables, that is not true. So suppose you have a function of f of x and y, and now you do a lambda, then you could have lambda this, and you want this to be lambda to some power delta times f of xy. Then there are many possibilities. You could have any function of x by y times x to the power minus delta. So this function cannot be fixed from here, because if you take a ratio, then the scaling will cancel out, and you can have any function of x and y. But in the case of 2-point function, we have only a single function R12. So in that case, the only possible solution is that it's some constant. That constant can depend upon delta 1, delta 2. So we will just label it as C12. Okay, so C12 means it depends upon which two operators you're taking times R12 to the power minus delta 1. Okay. But now let's look at special conformal transformation. So special conformal transformation tells you that f of R12. So now we know the form of R12. So that means C12 times R12 to the power of minus R12 prime to the power of minus delta 1 minus delta 2 has to be equal to 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of minus delta 1, sorry, plus delta 1 times 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square to the power of plus delta 2 times C12 R12, right? Because we know that f of R12 prime should become this factor times f1, f of R12, right? Just now we wrote. Is it okay? Hello?
Yes, sir.
We're just using this thing that we wrote here, this thing. But now for one variable. Okay. So this way. But R12 prime we know, because we know how distance is transformed. So we know from here. So first of all, C12 cancels both sides. But R12 prime we know how it transforms. R12 prime transforms, as I just now wrote, it should be R12. So this thing should become R12 to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 divided by 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square. So this whole thing b square x1 square. So sorry, let me write it down. So this is how it should transform. This is how the function should transform, but we know how R12 transforms. So R12 prime we know is R12 divided by square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square times square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square. Okay. So the LHS we know how it transforms, right? This equation tells you how the LHS should transform. The right hand side it should be the what it should become. But we know how LHS transforms. So the LHS becomes R12 to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 times 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of delta 1 by 2 times, sorry, delta 1 plus delta 1 plus delta 2 by 2 times 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square to the power of delta 1 plus delta 2 by 2. Right? You understand? So this is how the LHS transforms, because we know how distance is transformed under this thing. So the LHS has to be equal to the RHS. Okay. So now you see it's clearly it's not the same. LHS is not equal to the RHS, except when delta 1 is equal to delta 2. Then it becomes the same, and that's the only solution. You understand? Because LHS is like this, RHS is like this, RHS is like this. So these two are the same exactly when times there is a so LHS and RHS are the same only when x1 is so delta 1 is equal to delta 2. Delta is equal to delta 2. Okay. So what does that mean? That means that if delta 1 is not equal to delta 2, this equation must not have any solution. So that means in that case we divided by the C12, no? That is because we assume that C12 is non-zero, but it means that if delta 1 is not equal to delta 2, C12 must be 0, right? Because otherwise there is no solution to this equation. So therefore we can write C12 as some constant C1 times delta 1 comma delta 2, Kronecker delta. Is this clear? Because if delta 1 is not equal to delta 2, this equation has no solution. If I cancel C12, so one solution to this is C12 is 0. Then of course both sides are trivially 0. But if you don't want C12 to be 0, then the only possibility is delta 1 has to equal to delta 2. So that means C12 is 0 when delta 2 1 is not equal to delta 2. And okay. So therefore C12 is equal to C1 times delta 1 delta 2. And therefore from here we see immediately that O1 x1 O2 x2 is equal to delta 1 comma delta 2 C over over R12 times 2 delta 1, because it is delta 1 plus delta 2, but that's the same as delta 1 2 delta 1, because otherwise it's 0 anyway.
So R12 is already a mod. Why we need another mod?
Oh, sorry. Thanks. So what this means is that we basically, so the 2-point function is actually completely fixed. So the 1-point function up to this constant C1, but the C1 is not so important, because you can always redefine your operators, and you can just call this O1 by root C1 and O2 by root C1. So O1 and O2 are two operators which are the same delta. Okay, so both of them have the same delta. Let's call it delta. So both of them have the same delta. Otherwise, it's 0. Okay. So, and now we call this as our new O1, and this as our new O2. Okay. So your this thing is that O1 x1 times O1 x2 is given by 1 over R1 2 delta, and O1 x1 O2 x2 is equal to 0 unless delta 1 is equal to delta 2. And if it's delta 1 is equal to delta 2, you get the same answer. Okay. So what we have done is that we have redefined we have used from the 2-point function. So what we are saying is that we make the 2-point function the constant equal to 1 by redefining our operators in this way. Okay. So this is not so this is not very strange or anything. What this means is that if you have an action, okay. So let's say you have some action which is some it's like some g times integral del mu phi phi dx. Okay, this action is equivalent to saying half of del mu phi ddx. There's no difference, because I can just call root g times phi as my phi prime. All right, so then it becomes just half of del mu phi, root g by yeah, like this. I can just redefine it like this. So it is basically saying that the kinetic term, okay, the kinetic term coefficient you are fixing. You're fixing the kinetic term coefficient in such a way that your 2-point function is all the constant in front of the 2-point function is always 1. You can always do that. But suppose you have an action which is like this. So this freedom you have, but suppose you have an action which has more than quadratic term. Suppose you have an action which is g1 times del mu phi, and then you have another term which is g2 times phi square. Okay, and you could have other terms also, whatever. You could have other terms also, say g3 times phi 4 and so on. All right. Now this one term, I can always make it equal to whatever I want. I can make it half if I want. So as I said, I just take root g1 phi, I just call it phi prime by root 2. So then I immediately get s is equal to half del mu phi prime. Okay, this is called but now these things I cannot put all of them to whatever I want. I can only put one to whatever I want. The other things, these are physical quantities. I will have to measure them. Okay, or I have to calculate them by doing a mathematical calculation. So then now your new coupling constants become g2 by 2g1 phi prime square, and so on for the other higher order terms. So this new one you can call half m square if you want. All right, because normally that is how you call it, half m square. So if you want, you can call it half m square. Okay, but you cannot fix m equal to 1 or m equal to half or anything like that. The m will remain, and it has a physical significance because it is a mass of the particle. So different particles, all particles, you cannot put mass equal to same value. Right. So yeah. So this is the point that in the conformal case, what happens? There is no mass term, because we remember we had seen when we wrote down actions that you cannot write an m square phi square because it's not scale invariant. So in our case, we won't have a phi square term. Okay, we will just have a higher phi 4 or whatever. All right. So this is just an aside. I'll just all right. So this freedom that you have, that you can change the normalization of your kinetic term. That freedom is basically what you're seeing in the level of correlation function. That you can make the 2-point function coefficient whatever you want. Okay. So basically, so till now what we understand is that your 1-point function in a CFT in a conformal field theory is equal to 0, and a 2-point function of primary fields in a CFT is given by 1 over R12 to the power of 2 delta 1, 2 delta. So basically 1-point and 2-point functions are completely fixed. So remember that if you didn't have conformal invariance, you only had Lorentz invariance and translation invariance, then you cannot go further than this. None of this will be there. You can only say that it's a function of R12. You cannot say anything more. You have to stop here. It's a function of R12, but you don't know what the function is. You cannot find it from symmetries. So here the thing is that you can fix also the 2-point function. Okay, you can also fix the 2-point function. Now let's look at the 3-point function. So again, if you start from what we did, we know that this be a function of R12 and R13 and R23. Also three variables: R12, R2, R23. Now impose scaling invariance, we get that f of lambda R12, lambda R13, and lambda R23 will be given by lambda to the power of minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta 3 times f of R12, R13, R23. Okay. And if you impose special conformal transformation, then you have f of lambda, not lambda, sorry, f of R12 prime So let's write it like this. Before that, let's try what is the general solution for this. So the general solution to this equation will be you can write f, which is a function of R12, R13, R23. You can write this as a, let's say, a expansion. So you can write this as sum over R12 to the minus delta 1, R13 to the minus delta 2, so let's call it delta. So R12 to the power of minus delta 3, R13 to the power of minus delta 2, and R23 to the power of minus delta 1 times some arbitrary coefficient C123. It's a sum over all possible delta 1, delta 2, delta 3, such that delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3 has to be equal to delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3, right? This has to be the most general solution. So now it cannot be one term, it can be more than one term. Okay. Other way of saying the same thing is that you can now write this f as you could write this as R12 to the power of minus delta 1, R13 to the power of minus delta 3, R13 to the power of minus delta 2, and R23 to the power of minus delta 1 times any arbitrary function of R12 by R13, comma R12 by R23. Okay. because this ratio, if you scale, this ratio will cancel. Okay, and so this G is not fixed. So you can write it. So now you cannot fix the function just from scale invariance, because and this is related to the discussion we were having when we talked about what are the invariants under conformal transformation. Because when you scale, you can have functions which are invariant under scaling, and those are ratios. So you can have a ratio or cross ratio. Sorry, a cross ratio is something which is invariant under conformal transformation. Sorry, under scaling transformation. Because if you take R12 by R13 or R12 by R23, they are invariant under scaling. So, so if you want this kind of a behavior, lambda to the power minus, you just multiply by these factors, and you write this times G, any arbitrary function of these quantities. Right. The same thing I'm saying in this way, that that G is arbitrary means the same thing like saying C is arbitrary. C can be arbitrary function, and it can be any function of delta 1. So this R12 to the some power minus delta 3, R13 to some power minus delta 2, and R23 to some power minus delta 1. Only constraint is the sum of the deltas should be equal to capital delta 1 plus capital delta 2 plus capital delta 3. Because then if you multiply R by lambda, you'll get this power lambda to the minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta 3. Is this okay what I'm saying? You can think of it two ways. One, you can say that it's that you can have an invariant which is invariant under scaling. These are the cross ratios. Sorry, so these are not cross ratios. What I'm saying, these are the ratios. So these are ratios, R12 by R13, R12 by R23. These are ratios. But yeah. So you can write it. You can say that function is completely undetermined function of the ratios, or you can say that instead of writing as G, you can write it as C123 coefficient in an arbitrary expansion, each of R12 to the minus delta 3, R13 to minus delta 2, R23 to minus delta 2, and some over all possible deltas. Okay, all possible deltas. But now you have to impose special conformal invariance. And special conformal invariance tells you that the f of R12 prime dot R R12 prime, R13 prime, and R23 prime is given by 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of what was it, delta 1 times 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square to the power of delta 2 times 1 minus 2 b dot x3 plus b square x3 square to the power of delta 3 times f of R1, R2, R3. Sorry, R12, R13. Is it okay? So now let's substitute the function back. Now the point is the following: that earlier we could say that this G is completely unfixed, so we cannot fix G by this. But if you impose, there is no function which is invariant, no function of 3 variables which is invariant. So here there are only 3 variables: R12, R13, and R23. There's no function of 3 variables which is invariant under this special conformal transformation. As we had mentioned earlier, that the only invariants are R12, R13, sorry, R34 divided by, which is called the cross ratio, R13, R24, or R12, R34 divided by R14, R23. These are what are invariant under special conformal transformation. Cross ratios are invariant, but for that you need 4 points to construct a cross ratio. So we cannot write down G at all. Okay, we cannot write down G. And we can and we can also see this from this perspective, that you have C, you have F R12 prime, R13 prime, R23 prime. This will be given by sum over C123, sum over delta 1, delta 2, delta 3 times R12 to the power of minus delta 1 divided by square root of 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of delta 1, delta
3, I think.
delta 3 I have written here.
So the
Delta
sum
3.
is over delta 1, delta 2, delta 3.
Sum over
Decimal.
all possible powers, such that your delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3 should be capital delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3. Okay. And similarly for other two terms. So we can immediately take this out. So then we will get this to be sum over delta 1, delta 2, delta 3, C1, 2, 3 times what you get from each term. You will get, sorry, this should be on top actually. So it goes on top. So this will be 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of minus delta 3. But you'll get a similar term. This x1 will also, because there's also a r13 to the power of minus delta 2 and r23 to the power of minus delta 1. So from here also you'll get a x1 factor. So you'll get this plus delta 2. Okay. And similarly, you'll get a factor 1 minus 2 b dot x2 plus b square x2 square to the power of delta 1 plus delta 3. And times you'll get a 1 minus 2 b dot x plus b dot x3 plus b square x3 square to the power of delta 1 plus delta 2 times r12 to the power of minus delta 1, r13, sorry, delta 3, r13 to the power of minus delta 2 and r23 to the power of minus delta 1. Is it okay? And now this has to be equal to sum over delta 1, delta 2, delta 3, C1, 2, 3 times what do you get from there? You get, but here you get an overall factor. So you get, this has to be equal to 1 minus 2 b dot x1 plus b square x1 square to the power of delta 1 times this to the power of delta 2 times to the power of delta 3. So multiplied overall times r12 to the power of minus delta 3, r13 to the power of minus delta 2, r23 to the power of minus delta 1. But now since this sum, it's over sum, so each coefficient must be equated, right? And therefore each coefficient has to be equated, which means that this bracket term has to be equal to this for all delta 1, delta 2, delta 3. Okay, but is it okay? Because r12 to the power minus delta 3, r13 to the power minus delta 2, r23 to the minus delta 1, every power has to be equal, because your r1, r2 can be any point. So this is an infinite number of equations. So this is only possible to solve if every term is equal. Otherwise, it's not possible to solve this. Okay, because r12, r13, r23 can be any numbers. And therefore, from here, if you compare, what you get here is that delta 1 has to be equal to delta 3 plus delta 2. Delta 2 has to be equal to delta 1 plus delta 3, and delta 3 has to be equal to delta 1 plus delta. Why? Because you see, this into this has to be equal to this into this into this. But one has x1, one has x2, one has x3, so they cannot be equal unless the power itself is equal. So that's why delta, capital delta 1, which is the power of x1, must be equal to delta 3 plus delta 2. Similarly, the power of x2 has to be the same, so you get delta 2 has to be equal to delta 1 plus delta 3, and capital delta 3 has to be equal to small delta 1 plus small delta 2. Okay, and we had this other equation But actually there's a half factor. No, I'm missing a half here somewhere. Oh yeah, there's a half here. Sorry, I missed a half here. There's no delta 3, it's delta 3, but there's a square root here. Sorry. And this immediately automatically satisfies the other condition that delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3 has to be delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3. So this is automatically satisfied because just take sum of both sides, it's automatically satisfied. But now you can find small delta 1, small delta 2, and small delta 3, and it's uniquely fixed. Okay, so that means that in this summation there's only one term, and that term is given by, so small delta 1 is equal to if you subtract this from this, then you'll get delta 3 minus delta 2 by 2 is equal to delta 2 minus delta 3, and from this equation you get delta 1 is delta 3 plus delta 2 by 2. So you can just add and subtract, and you'll get immediately that delta 3 is given by, if you add, you'll get delta 3 is given by delta 2 plus delta 1 minus delta 3, and delta 2 is given by delta 1 plus delta 3 minus delta 2. So you see from the symmetry, you can also see that the next for delta 1 also you'll get the same thing. You get this to be delta 2 plus delta 3 minus delta. You can check for the other equation that this is what you'll get. Okay, and therefore
only one term in this summation survives.
Only one term in summation survives. Yeah, because so that means that the term is completely fixed. The 3-point function is also completely fixed.
Yes, okay.
Only one term survives, and so if you do this O1 x1, O2 x2, and O3 x3, this thing. So this is delta 1, this is delta 2, this is delta 3. Now this is given by one number, which is C12, divided by R12 to the power of delta 2 plus delta 1 minus delta 3 times R13 to the power of delta 1 plus delta 3 minus delta 2 times R23 to the power of delta 2 plus delta 3. Okay, now you see, now you cannot put C1, 2, 3 to 1 because I've already normalized O1 and O2 and O3 so that their 2-point function is 1. Right, now I cannot again normalize O1, O2, O3. This is the same as saying that if I in the action, if I normalize the kinetic term, I cannot normalize other terms. I can only normalize one term. Similarly, you can normalize the 2-point function of each field, but then the 3-point function is whatever it is. So these numbers are not fixed by symmetry. Not fixed by symmetry. That means this depend on the theory. Okay, so these are called coupling constants. So this is a coupling constant, the interaction term. So this is a 3-point function is an interaction term, and this interaction strength C123 is the interaction strength, which is not fixed by the coupling. Okay, sorry, not fixed by symmetry. And this not fixed by symmetry means that C123 changes from theory to theory. Okay, but the overall functional form does not change. That just depends upon the dimension of the field. It does not depend on what theory you're using. It could be a Maxwell theory, it could be some other conformal field theory including scalars, or it could be some theory of conformal field theory including fermions. Okay, all of them will have the same 3-point function up to an overall constant which will be different, and that constant will change from one theory to another theory. But the functional form of the 3-point function is completely fixed. Okay, so the 3-point function in any theory is specified up to a number. Okay, it's specified up to a number, and that number is C123. So more generally, or rather, we can write this as OI, ith field at xi, OJ, jth field at xj, and OK at xk, this will be Cijk divided by Rij to the power of delta I plus delta j minus delta k, Rik to the power of delta I plus delta k minus delta j times Rjk times delta j plus delta k minus delta. So Cijk will depend upon what operators you're taking, what is for different I and j it will be different, and also on what theory you're taking. So different theories will have different theories. So the Cijk it depends upon the dynamics of the theory. It's a dynamical, is one of the dynamical content of your theory. It cannot be fixed from symmetry. So dynamical content means what cannot be fixed by symmetry. Okay. So just from the fact that it is conformally invariant, we can say that the 3-point function is fixed up to an overall constant, but we cannot fix the constant. Okay. So is there any question up to this point? But now, of course, from 4-point function, you cannot fix it anymore. Because in 4-point function, we know that you can construct an invariant, which is the invariant of the cross ratio, function of the cross ratios. This thing. So therefore, now you cannot. Now even if you impose conformal the special conformal invariance, you still will have one function, because now the function in 4-point case, you are looking at O1 x1, O2 x2, O3 x3, and O4 x4. So this will be a function from Lorentz invariance and translation invariance. This is a function of R12, R13, R23, R13, R14, R23, R24, and R34. These are the number of variables that you can have. Okay, but now this since there are 4 points x1, x2, x3, x4, you cannot fix. You can always construct a function g, which is a function of cross ratio. You can construct something like 3, 4 divided by this thing R13 to R24, and another function, another variable R12, R34 divided by R14, R23. So this function cannot be fixed. So therefore, you'll never be able to fix the 4-point. You will now not be able to fix the 4-point function completely. Okay. So the role of symmetry up to this point is that you can completely fix the 1-point function, 2-point function, and 3-point function. 3-point function up to a constant. So is there any question up to this point?
And in case of 4-point function, why it cannot be fixed? You told. Can you repeat this?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll show it to you. The point is that suppose you impose scaling invariance. So then what can you say? You can say that f of R12 lambda lambda R13 dot dot dot. This will be lambda to the power of minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta 3 minus delta 4, right? Times f of again R12, R13, and so on. So just like last time, what will we do? Like last time, we will have we can say that so you can say that f of you take this f to be a function of sum over c 1, 2, 3, 4, and well, you can write 5, 6 also. So you have R12, R13, R14, R23, R24, and R34 to the power of minus delta. Now I don't know how to use variable. So let's say minus delta 1, minus delta 2, minus delta 3, minus delta 4, minus delta 5, and minus delta 6. Okay. So then from here we will get the constraint from scaling that delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3 plus delta 4 plus delta 5 plus delta 6 is equal to delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3 plus delta 4. This is some scaling. Is this clear? If you scale it, you will need this thing. So if you scale this thing, you sum over all deltas, but you sum over all the delta to delta 6, but it has to satisfy this equation, right? So remember, the number of variables is 6. Okay. The point is that this because it's and remember we have written it as summation. Actually, this need not be a summation. This could even be a integration, because this delta need not be real, need not be integers, right? Only thing we need to demand is that the sum of that has to be equal to delta 1 plus delta 2 plus delta 3. I am just using the summation symbol, but it actually could be, it could be continuous. Delta could be continuous. But okay, anyway, let's write it as a summation. Let's assume that it is Taylor expandable around some point. So you have written as a summation. And
in the last line, capital delta 1 plus capital delta 2 plus capital delta 3 plus capital delta 4 will not be delta 5 delta 6.
no, no, because here you have this, no, lambda to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta 3 minus delta 4.
Okay.
So you're equating both sides. From here you will get lambda to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 to minus delta 6. But from the other side, you will get lambda to the power minus delta 1 minus delta 2 minus delta 3 minus delta 4. So when you equate this, it has to be equal to this.
Okay, sir.
You understand? But now what happens if you're doing a special conformal transformation? Well, the basic point is that you will see that number of equations is less than the number of variables. Okay, so the deltas are not completely fixed. Okay, so since the deltas are not completely fixed, you'll have some deltas which are arbitrary, and so this function, this C's cannot be fixed because of that reason. It can run over any values, deltas. Even if one delta is unfixed, that delta can run over any number, right? So it's an arbitrary function. This is the same way of saying that instead of writing it like that, I could have also said in terms of instead of this object, because you see, if you can, the point is that I can satisfy all the constraints without completely fixing f. That is the point. I always, so suppose, okay, let's put it like this. So suppose I give you one solution to this equation. Okay, so let's say you have got R12 to the power of minus delta. So yeah, so let's say you take, what I'm trying to say is that let's say you take one solution to this. This can have many solutions, but let's say you take one solution. So you take delta 1 to be something, delta 2 to be something, so that the sum is this thing. All right. So and then you write this as R12 to the power of that delta 1 times R34 to the power of that delta 6. But you can always multiply by a function which is a function of cross ratios. You understand? So point is that suppose I have so this is the better way of saying it. Suppose I have a function which is a function of R12, R13, dot R34. I take that function and I just multiply that function by G R12 R34 over R13 R24, comma R12 R34 divided by R14 R23. Okay, just an arbitrary function. This will also have the same transformation properties. Why? Because the transformation property of this is nothing. It does not transform at all under any transformation. So whatever way this transforms, this will also this whole thing will also transform the same way, because this is invariant. This object is invariant. You understand? So from what are we trying to do? We are trying to say that how this function transforms under conformal invariance, right? So if I can always multiply by a function which does not transform at all, that function cannot be fixed. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Is this clear to everybody what I'm trying to say? Because what we are seeing is that there is a function which, when you do a special conformal transformation, it transforms in a particular way, right? But suppose I multiply that function by a function of cross ratios, that function will also transform in exactly the same way as the earlier function, because the cross ratio function is completely it does not change at all under conformal transformations. So all the transformation will come only from this term, and that is why the G cannot be fixed at all. So instead of f, you can choose f times G. That will also satisfy all your equations, all your transformation symmetry equations, and that is why f cannot be fixed. Is this expression clear? What I'm saying? Because when you have 4 points, you can always construct a invariant. That is the whole point. Okay. because after all, what we are finding, we are looking at this equation, right? That this is fx1 prime dot 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 xn prime. It is up to some factor times f x1 to xn, right? But if there exists a function such that gx1 prime to xn prime is equal to gx1 to xn, then I can always multiply instead of f. If I multiply by this g, this is the same as this. This also satisfies this equation because g does not change at all. So f cannot be fixed because I can always multiply it by an arbitrary function of the cross ratios. And the point is that under conformal transformation, to construct an invariant, you need at least 4 points. That is why the 1-point function, 2-point function, 3-point function gets fixed. Okay, whatever I'm saying is only for scalar fields. For other fields, it is the transformation is much more complicated. You can find it, but you can fix the 2-point, 3-point functions. You can find the form of the 2-point and 3-point functions, but it is much more complicated. So I will not talk about that, except in 2 dimensions. In 2 dimensions, what happens is that now you have an infinite symmetry. It's okay. So when you have that infinite symmetry, then you can fix it more. Okay. It's not an infinite symmetry actually, but we will see what happens in 2 dimensions. No, I mean you can fix it more, meaning it's easy to fix for any field, any phi, any field. Even over there, you only fix it for 3-point functions, but it's easy to show for non-scalar fields also, not just for scalar fields. You can do it for any fields, because there, in that case, your spin, as I said, was any primary field is only labeled by h and h bar, 2 numbers. So there, unlike the higher dimensional case, we can talk about any primary field, not just scalars. Any primary field, 2-point function and 3-point functions. But again, over there, 4-point functions onwards, you cannot fix, because the symmetry is only the global symmetry. So remember, as I said, that the symmetries are only global symmetries. It's not the local symmetry. It is the global symmetry. So the higher point functions can't be fixed, but you can. But it's easier to write down for any field, not just a scalar field. In higher dimensions, it's easy to write down the scalar field. For other spin fields, it's more difficult. Okay. So any questions up to this point? So if not, then we will continue. We'll start with the word identities. Is it okay up to this point? Please say something.
Yes, sir. Okay.
So now we go to the word identities. So what have we learned up to now? That by using the global conformal symmetry of the theory, you can fix the 2-point, 3-point, and of course 1 point is 0 of conformal fields. Okay, so what is word identities? So word identities is the analog of conserved currents, the Noether's theorem in the quantum theory. Okay. So what you do is that instead of doing so, when we were discussing symmetries, symmetry variations of the correlation function, what we did was we said that the first step, remember, was that we said this O1 x1 prime dot On xn prime. This, by a change of dummy variable, we said that is z times d phi prime e to the minus s phi prime times, we said this O1 prime of x1 prime dot dot on prime of xn prime. And the next step after we did this, so this is a change of dummy fields, and then after this, the next step, this was step 1. Then the step 2 was that we say that phi to phi prime is a symmetry transformation. Symmetry transformation. Okay. But now what we do is that we say that but in this case what we do is that it's not a symmetry transformation, but it's a transformation where the symmetry parameter is an arbitrary function of x, just like Noether's theorem. So in this case we say that phi goes to phi prime, okay, which is phi plus a shift which is omega a ga of phi, but this omega is the epsilon. So the epsilon, what we call epsilon or infinitesimal transformation. A symmetry transformation is where the epsilon is a constant. All right. So phi prime of x is phi x. So this is how the field phi will change. Okay. But now we make this a function of x. All right. We make this a function of x. So now, of course, the action is not invariant, right? But the measure we'll continue to assume is invariant up to for this first order change. And why that is the case is because when you find this measure, what is the measure? So I'll try to give you a very naive argument, but a measure is what? Usually, if you have a this thing d of x prime, d of y prime, d of z prime. When you change it, it becomes the Jacobian times d of x, d of y, d of z, right? But this Jacobian is determinant, del x prime, del x, determinant of this, right? So here instead of dx prime, you have a d phi, okay, d phi prime. So d phi prime, if this is basically, it is like dx prime, but it's a functional integral. So it's a d phi 1x. It's a product of what I'm saying is it's a, so this the d phi x is it's an integral at every point in x. So it's basically, you write it like this, that d phi x1 d phi x1 plus a small shift epsilon 1 dot 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 d phi xn plus epsilon n up to infinity. This is what the measure means. Okay, so when you do the integral, you're basically integrating over each of these. It's a multi-dimensional integral like this. I'm assuming you have seen this in your path integral. I'm told that you have done this, that you have seen what is a path integral. So it's a path integral is at every point you have an integration in the space of functions. So path integral is not a function integration in space. It's an integration at every point of space in all values of the function. Okay. So the integration is not in x1. The integration is in phi, the functional form of phi, at every point of x. That's why it's a product of at every point of x. So if you did this Jacobian here, then what you would have is del phi prime x1 times del phi x1 dot 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 for every value of x. You have a product determinant of that you have to find. Okay, so at each point, so when you go to phi prime, it is this. So at each point you have a Jacobian, the del phi prime x1 del phi x1 del phi prime x2 del phi x2 and so on. At each point you have a term like that. Okay. Now we know that this Jacobian is just one if this is a symmetry transformation, because the Jacobian, because we have assumed because by definition the symmetry means that the measure does not change. So that means if this transformation was a symmetry transformation, then the Jacobian is one. But what is the difference between the symmetry transformation and the non-symmetry transformation? That these epsilon is a function of x, right? That's the only difference. But here the derivative, this partial derivative is not in x, it's in the functional form. So if it was one for epsilon is a function of x, it will be one for all epsilon, because it is not becoming one due to the functional form of epsilon. It's becoming one if it's one for a symmetry transformation. It will continue to be one if epsilon is made a function of x, because the derivative, the partial derivative is not in x, it's in phi. Okay, so if I shifted by epsilon, whatever be the extra term, that extra term would have been 0 because we know Jacobian is 1. But if it was 0 when epsilon is a constant, it would have been 0 even if epsilon is a function of x, because that epsilon will just come out of it. The derivative is a functional derivative. So when you do a functional derivative, x will not change. So x will not play any role, and that is why if the Jacobian is 1 for symmetry transformations, it will continue to be 1 if I do a infinitesimal function, if I make it a function of x. Was this understandable, or I'll try to explain again? The point is that you're doing a Jacobian. Okay, the Jacobian will be 1 plus epsilon, 1 plus something proportional to epsilon, right? Because the change is infinitesimal change. Okay, but we know that if epsilon is a constant, it would have been that additional term would have been 0, right? Because it's under symmetry transformation, the Jacobian is 1. But this Jacobian is not a derivative in x; it's a derivative in the functional field. So the epsilon x will just come out. You're not doing a derivative in x. So whatever was the reason for which that Jacobian was 1 continues to hold even now. Okay, and that is why the Jacobian will be 1, and therefore the measure will remain same if you do an infinitesimal transformation. This might be a bit complicated, so please let me know if you have not understood what I'm saying.
মানে বলতে চাইছেন যে যেহেতু ডিফারেন্সিয়েশনটা উইথ রেসপেক্ট টু দ্য ফিল্ড,
হ্যাঁ, যেহেতু এক্স্যাক্টলি
ফাংশন অফ এক্স কিংবা ওটা কনস্ট্যান্ট, সেটা কোনো ডিপেন্ড করবে না।
ডিপেন্ড করবে, কারণ ওই epsilon সঙ্গে যেটা ছিল সেটা 0 হবে।
হ্যাঁ, ওকে।
বুঝতে পারছো? তো সেটা তো এখনোই 0 হবে, মানে আগে যা ছিল সেটা, ওটাতে কোনো তফাৎ হয়নি। তো তফাৎ তো epsilon টা ফাংশন অফ x হয়ে গেছে, বাট that does not change the coefficient in front. So তাই জন্য, so what happens is that this thing, so actually now I should write this as z prime, এটাও z prime হওয়া উচিত, because এবার অ্যাকশনটা ইনভেরিয়েন্ট নয়। So now I should write it as z prime. আগে কেসে ওটা ডিনোমিনেটরটা z ই ছিল, but now I should write it as z prime because right, it is one thing. Okay, so since he's not there, I can talk in Bengali also. Shivam is not here, I guess, so I can talk. So yeah, so this is the thing. Okay, so now তো তাহলে কি হচ্ছে যে এই যে কোরিলেশন ফাংশনটা আছে O1 prime x1 prime ON prime xn prime, ঠিক আছে? That will now be equal to আমি জাস্ট আগে উপরটা লিখছি d phi, এখানে d phi হয়ে যাবে বিকজ ওটা ইনভেরিয়েন্ট। আর কিন্তু এই পার্টটা কি হবে, এটা হবে s phi প্লাস, এবার আমরা জানি যে এটা কি হচ্ছিল, এটা হচ্ছিল epsilon a j mu a x ddx, রাইট? এবারে তো আমরা পেলাম যে এটা যে অ্যাকশনটা, যে এবার নয়থারের লজিকটা লাগাবো যে what did Noether say that action যদি এটা ইনফাইনিটেসিমাল, যদি ইনফাইনিটেসিমাল ট্রান্সফরমেশন করি আর epsilon এর ফাংশন অফ x করে দিই, তাহলে অ্যাকশনটা চেঞ্জ হবে বাই আ del mu j mu this thing, right? আর এখান থেকে তো আমরা বললাম যে যদি এটা অন শেল করে দিই তারপর এনি epsilon টা 0 হতে হবে, তাই জন্য del mu j mu টা 0 হবে। বুঝতে পারো কি বলছি? তো by Noether's theorem, the s will now change, but this change will be just proportional to del mu j mu a. A can be anything, so it depends upon what current it is. Sum of x ddx. This is the change, right? Times O1 prime x1 prime dot ON prime
j mu suffix এ a আছে না?
হ্যাঁ, এ আছে, মানে এটা কি, এটা ডিপেন্ড করছে তোমার যদি এটা মানে যদি এটা ধরো রোটেশন জন্য হয় তাহলে তো যে মিউ নিউ ল্যামডা আছে, তো যেটা হচ্ছে টি মিউ নিউ এক্স ল্যামডা মাইনাস টি মিউ ল্যামডা এক্স নিউ। তো ওখানে আমি এ মানে হচ্ছে এই দুটোকে একসঙ্গে আমি এ বলছি, মানে আরো ইন্ডেক্স থাকতে পারে। হ্যাঁ, তো তাই জন্য ওই বাকি সব ইন্ডেক্স আমি জাস্ট এ বলে দিচ্ছি। I'm just calling all the rest of them A. So the A is whatever extra index is there. Okay, so if you don't, yeah, you can ignore it. You can just write epsilon x also, but we know that for even for translation, the current is T mu nu. So there I will call nu as A. Okay, all the other indices I'm calling as A. And that is what I mean. Okay. And by divided by Z prime.
So this O1, O2 you are writing, these are basically what physically, or basically what you have told? This
O1, O2 are any set of local operators. So
Okay.
if you are in a scalar field theory, this OX could be just phi also, or any function of phi. Okay, so if you must have done free field theory, and maybe you have now started interaction also. So then this in that theory, O is any function. So that means your field is phi, right? So O can be any function of phi. So phi is an operator. So any function of phi, whatever. So one function, for instance, could be phi square, or it could be del mu phi, del mu phi. That's another operator. This O could be this also, or you could take O to be del mu phi, or you could take it O to be the energy momentum tensor, and that is given by del mu phi, del nu phi minus eta mu nu phi square, whatever. So anything, all of this could be O's. It could be a vector operator, scalar operator, for yeah, any operator. But whatever basic fields you have in your theory, it is constructed out of that, right?
Okay, means it is any function of
Any function.
operators.
Yeah, any function. It could be, I mean, physically, you might be interested in energy correlations. So then you will take this O to be T mu nu or T00. That's the energy density. So you can calculate. You may be interested in what is the correlation between energy density at various points, or you could just be interested in the correlation between fields at various points. So the phi field itself. What is the value of phi? So when you're doing when you either you probably have not yet reached scattering. So when you do scattering and all, you will have to find you basically you will need these correlation functions involving phi's and all that. So yeah, so there the endpoint function could be just an endpoint function of phi. Okay, so it could be just that. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So now now this O1 prime x1 prime, O1 prime x1 prime, I'll just write it as O1 x1 prime plus what I had written earlier. I'll just write it as epsilon A GA, okay, acting on O1 x1 prime. This is the change in the field when you do this transformation. The change in the field is O1 prime x1 prime is O1 times this. So here there is, I'm sorry, here
You change in field for a fixed space-time point.
sorry, yeah, no, so yeah, so for fixed space-time point, yeah, fixed space-time point.
Yes, okay.
Actually, I'm just doing it slightly in a wrong way. It's a better way to do this. Yeah, okay, yeah, I think it's okay. All right. So I do it. I just substitute this, and the G's, what these G's are, we have already calculated for various fields. We have already calculated what the G's are when we were looking at this conformal representations. So we have to so if it's a vector field, we know what is G. If it's a spinor field, we know what is G. If it's scaling transformation, if it's a scalar field, then we know what is G, and so on. So we know what is G for different fields and for different transformations. All right, for scaling, we know what is G for scalars, for tensors, for spinors, and all that, and similarly for all the other transformations. So you just substitute. And now so now what will happen now inside in the numerator, you have this O1 prime x1 prime dot On prime xn prime, right? We can now write this as O1 x1 prime plus delta O1, where delta O1 is what is this quantity, is this object epsilon AGA. Okay, so I'm just writing as delta O1 times O1 O2 x2 prime plus delta O2 and so on. Okay, and since this is an infinitesimal, I can write this as O1 O2 On plus delta O1 O2 dot On plus O1 delta O2 dot On and so on, right? Because delta is infinitesimal, the last one will be the O1 to On minus 1 delta On. Okay, what we will do is that we will so just to save notation, so that because we do write a lot of terms, we will call this product O1 x1 prime dot On xn prime. So I'm just following the same thing that yellow book is saying. I'll call this whole thing as X. So X is a multi-local operator. It's a product of these operators. It's a multi-local operator at x1 prime dot xn prime. Okay, and therefore then what I will say is that I have got x prime. So x prime is equal to x plus delta x, and this delta x is this sum, this whole sum, this thing. This whole thing is delta x. So this side is x prime. This is equal to x plus this is delta. This is delta x. Okay, this just to, I mean, I don't need to do this. I'm just doing it so that I don't have to write all these terms at the same time. So what we have seen therefore is that what we have seen here is that x prime is equal to d phi times e to the minus s phi, okay, minus integral epsilon a x del mu j mu a x ddx. Remember here x doesn't matter because these are dummy variable. I can write it x prime x whatever, doesn't matter. Times here I have x plus delta x, so that I don't have to write all those terms always like this. And divided by z prime. But what is z prime? Okay, so divided by z prime. Okay, but what is z prime? So z prime is now d phi, because the phi does not change, the measure does not change, times e to the minus s phi times e to the minus integral epsilon a del mu j mu a x ddx, right? This is it, z prime. But now again, since epsilon is small, I can expand this and write just like we do in perturbation theory. I can expand this and keep the first term. So z prime is integral d phi e to the minus s phi times 1 minus integral epsilon A del mu J mu AX ddx. The rest terms I just drop. And so therefore this is just given by Z minus integral. So now this epsilon mu, epsilon A is just a function, so I'll just take it out. Sorry. So I can write this as integral epsilon minus integral epsilon A x ddx times d phi e to the minus s phi times del mu J mu AX. Right? Why am I writing del mu J mu inside the thing? Because this J mu is a function of phi. So it's the function. The current will be a function of the fields. So when you do this path integral, you have to put it inside this path integral. But epsilon is not a function of phi. So you can just put it out. Okay. And now this was what we want to calculate is z prime inverse, because z prime is the denominator. So z prime inverse I can just write as 1 by z into 1 minus integral epsilon AX ddx times d phi e to the minus s phi del mu J mu AX divided by z, right? The whole inverse. And that we know because this epsilon is small, I can just write this as plus. The minus goes away, and I can just write it as this times this plus. So we just substitute it there. So okay, first just put it as z prime, and first let's do the numerator part. So what will you get? So you'll get the same logic here will tell you that this is e to the minus s phi. Okay, and here you have a 1 minus, again by the same argument earlier. So you have a 1 minus epsilon A x del mu J mu x ddx times x plus delta x. Okay. So let's look at the numerator term. So the first term, so I'm just writing the denominator is z prime. You'll see why. I'll do that later. So the first term, this is z prime here, but this term will be, the first term will be what? It will be d phi e to the minus s times 1 times x by z prime. So you will have integral d phi. Okay, so e to the minus s phi times x. This is one term. The second term is minus d phi 1 minus epsilon A x J mu del mu J mu x, right? So second term that you get so what I'm saying is there's a x into 1, then there's a x into epsilon, and the delta x into 1. These are the only terms from the top which will have which will linear in epsilon. Okay, so
In a second term, you have written x only at the last.
yeah, x, and there should be one more term. So I don't know what to write actually. One second. So just I'll just write this as RHS numerator. Right? These three terms are there. The other term is delta x times epsilon, but that is 0 because it's quadratic. Right? So there are 4 terms, but you only get 3 terms because the 4th term is quadratic.
স্যার লাস্টের টার্মটা প্লাস হবে না?
কেন? x plus delta x ছিল তো, তো কিন্তু বাইরে তো মাইনাস আছে। ও ওকে, সরি সরি, থ্যাংক ইউ।
আরে একটু উপরে ওঠাবেন স্লাইড।
So what I'll do is I'll stop here. Yeah, তোমার দেখে নাও, because so I have to redo this again.
ওকে স্যার।
Yeah, so actually I may have made a mistake somewhere, so I'll just stop here. I'll continue this derivation next time. So I think I might have missed a certain term. Anyway, so I'll just stop here. We'll continue next time. Anyway, so what we'll do is from this equation we'll get a what is called a Ward identity. So that's basically a correlation function involving del mu j and x. So that you can already see in some sense there's in del mu j and x there. So you'll get some equation involving del mu j and mu and x, and that is what is called a Ward identity. So that's the corresponding statement that in the classical theory we would say del mu j mu is 0. Now we will say del mu j mu x satisfies an identity. Okay, so that is what will be. So, but I'll stop here because I think I made a mistake somewhere. So anyway, any questions up to this point? We'll continue from tomorrow at 4:50. Is that okay? 4:50.
ডেল মিউ জে মিউটা কি অ্যাঙ্গুলার ব্র্যাকেটের মধ্যে থাকবে? হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
Angular?
হ্যাঁ, ইয়েস ইয়েস।
থাকবে, because j mu is a field. the function of the field. So it will be inside the angular bracket. Anyway, so we will continue from here, and then tomorrow we will work out the conformal Ward identities. Yeah. So once that is over, we will see this for 2 dimensions, and we'll straight away go to the Hilbert space structure. So the main goal is to so the main goal in any conformal field theory is to be able to calculate the dynamical how to solve the theory. So we will see it in some examples. Well, not in some examples. We will see what are the rules behind how to solve the theory. Yeah. Okay, so if any of you have not written present, then just do that. And then I'll. So 4:50, we will take the class tomorrow. Okay, so